Hi, welcome to another video of Carli 8. I've just pushed this to the internet and I've been working on the mkinitcpio CPIO files in general, and we need to have the initram file system to boot up. We need this file to boot up, right? But from Arch ISO, we get the Arch ISO here. This is not interesting to look at. Let's move you over here. So from this is the Linux preset just coming from Arch Linux. Let's delete some things here. And everything is fixed. So I'm gonna talk about it, how I fixed it. So it takes hours, right? It's started at 8 o'clock this morning, right? 15:39. This is the preset from Arch Linux preset. Linux stands for, well, sudo pacman minus s Linux, right? The idea is that we have a package, and the package is receiving a kind of template. And where's the template coming from? Well, first of all, you can have a look at your own system, right? You can always take a look at what's inside mkinitcpio and see what's inside here. Exactly the same thing. Then you might wonder, hey, where's that coming from? Well, from a template, from user, share, and then mkinitcpio hook preset. And all it's gonna do is change this package base, which is Linux or Linux LTS or Zen or Hardened, and it's gonna change that name, package base. All right, now Arch ISO is built the way it is, right? It's an application we get from Arch Linux, and it starts with this, the preset of Arch ISO. But later on our system, we need to have this particular setting. So that's the goal. That was the goal, to make sure that later on we'll have a version that's of course going to boot, but Arch ISO is gone there. So when we reinstall Linux, for instance, it will not create an Arch ISO image, which now it will, right? If you take the preset of Linux, it's gonna use this file and gonna create a Arch ISO image. All right. So I've put something in here already, which is going to be the future preset. I'm not gonna call it preset, otherwise it's gonna be started again. So it's gonna be built as a preset. This for him, this is now just a file. But what I'm gonna do is at some point in time, and that's of course the thing, when and am I going to tell the system, which is Arch Linux, which is Arch ISO, which is Calamares, which is the Calamares configuration, that this one is the one replacing that one, and it should take the content of this one rather than that one. So is there anything else I've changed in here? So I've been playing around. As you can see, lots of things have changed. We also added a line here to copy paste our pacman.conf. So our repo was not in there in the previous version. So this line says, find the script path and take pacman.conf, which is our repo from Carli, and put it in the work directory in here. So that's our repo back in. That's it. So like I've said, I've been trying this and that, and okay, this is old stuff that we've seen already. Now, what I've done is I looked at Carli Calamares config, and now it gets a little bit complicated, but you can always compare what we do in ArcoLinux, and in a sense, you can also compare with what we've done already with the browsers. We've created an instance, and all the explanations are in here and are in GitHub Calamares. So have a look at the code, read what they say. But the point is, just as we created an instance for the browsers, I've now created an instance to make sure that the process is started, and that's the process, well, the ID of the process, well, actually the instance. And I'm going to start instance, that's the instance for the module shell process. Tip, for instance, in documents, make sure you have here the GitHub of Calamares. Just type in github.com/ git clone / and then the URL of Calamares and get it and read everything that's in here, right? So what it needs is a shell process. So you go read everything you need to know about the shell process. It needs a configuration, a file, and the rest, did I read it? I don't think so, right? But you can look at the code. Sometimes I do read the code, like for instance, in the case of the initcpio, maybe interesting to mention that in here, when this module is executed, it's going to execute make initcpio -p Linux. Right? Why Linux? Because we told it to take Linux. That's set here in our previous videos. initcpio, here it is. We set it to use Linux, not Carli. So at some point in time, my Carli thing must become the Linux thing, the Linux preset. Now, it needs to become it before it's run, right? So before initcpio ever gets started, I need to make sure, and that's the shell process, Carli mk initcpio, run this thing, and this thing is defined up here, what it is, and it's going to start the shell process, and that's in here. It's gonna look at the configuration file and it's gonna say, what do I have to do? Well, you move everything that the root is the future SSD, so where we are going to work on later on. Well, find me Carli and move it, meaning overwrite or rename actually, right? That's the result is that we're going to have no more Carli, and the content of Carli is going to go inside Linux preset before it's going to launch the make initcpio, which you can always type if you want to type it. Sudo, of course, make initcpio -p Linux is something you can always type and then later update grub. Boom, done. So that's what it's going to do. The Calamares behind well, all the windows, a nice fancy look. It's still code. So that's basically what I've done. So we use the Arch ISO image as usual, but at some point in time, Calamares will run, and the result is, and it's still running, I see. The result is that if you ran it, then you have Dolphin, you go to the hard drive. Well, actually it was over there already. The result is we don't have Arch ISO image, which is normal, but we do have an initram fs and a fallback. So that's cool, but that was already solved. The thing was, we kept this Arch ISO setting. So back here, etc make initcpio has only one thing, not Carli anymore, but just Linux preset, and the content of Linux preset is my Carli, right? There's nowhere mention of Arch ISO, not here and not here. There was a line up here, text here, and a line down here. Come. So it's a matter of taste, where and what and how. But in the end result should be always the same, of course. If you do it in another way, it's possible probably. But it's a thinking process, an analyzing process. Where will I do it? With what tools will I do it? And at what time will I do it? So I decided to do it just before the creation of the initram files. There I just move one over the other and everything boots up. just fine. So let's boot up from the ISO. So I've built it already. And when it boots up, it boots up from the Arch ISO image. So we're following, here we go, Arch ISO image, and at that point in time, Arch ISO does not provide us anything. And by anything, I mean the following. There is nothing in boot. This is empty. It should have several things, right? Several files, but it's empty. It's booting with Arch ISO image from another place, not from here. So basically, we're following Arch ISO until we say, okay, now we need to distance ourselves because we need to have our init RAM file systems, and then we can boot. And that's what I've done. That's what I've pushed, and I will check the other GitHubs as well, that I have pushed everything. And that's for me, Carli 8 is for me now closed. Now we'll create the same thing, of course, for ArcoLinux. Cheers, guys.